watering system, the stock watering system, is a very important part of your whole grazing system. A lot of times your stock water can limit you and what you can do for your paddocks and how you set them up and everything. Our system is very simple. It's above ground, and we just basically go around the perimeter and down the middle of our paddocks, and it enables us to basically put a stock water wherever we want. Being above the ground, it's very simple to add a stall cock. Just take your hacksaw, cut one cut, and then install another bib valve here. It's about as simple as you can get, and that's the advantage of having an above ground system. There are some people that prefer below ground because it keeps the water cooler. That is true, it does. However, we found with our sheep that they will, the water isn't that hot ever, partly because we don't use a float in our water, and it just runs at about a gallon a minute and overflows into the ground where the water is. The disadvantage of having a buried system is, as we already mentioned, you've got to have it already figured out ahead of time where you're going to put your stock waters, and after that it's pretty hard to change. You need a backhoe and some time. And at least for us, we were never able to tell from the get-go where we wanted these stock waters. We've probably put in 20, and out of those 20 we've probably put in 10 after we had the whole system up and running. So an above ground supply line gives you a lot of versatility and simplicity. Some things to consider is how much your grazing unit is going to need for water, and as a rule of thumb, you've got to plan for different temperature extremes and remember that any animal is going to drink about twice as much water when the ambient temperature is at 70 degrees versus 90 degrees. So that's something that you have to plan in to your system for the amount of flow that's delivered through the system. And it's something that a lot of times we don't think about. When it gets hot, the water demands of your animals greatly increase. So our system is just a 3/4 inch black poly line for the supply. It comes off a hydrant that is fed by 1.5 inch line underground, and we just have a frost-free hydrant, and this supply line is hooked up to that. We have about 1,800 feet of this 3/4 inch supply line, and there is a fair amount of pressure loss at the end, but it supplies us. It works well for us. Sheep are a desert animal. They've evolved in the desert, and so they don't use a lot of water, particularly when they're on green grass that's 80% moisture. So what we use for the actual water itself is quite simple. It's just a 15-gallon drum that once upon a time had dairy soap in it, and we just cut it in half. And at first we installed a little float here, but the problem was that our flow rate it's about 2 gallons a minute if you open the valve full blast. That wasn't designed. We couldn't find a float valve that was designed for such a low pressure and low flow. So in the end, what we ended up doing was we took the float off and just reduced the valve flow to about 1 gallon a minute, and that seems to be plenty adequate for our sheep. The other thing that you want to keep in mind in the placement of your stock waters is, with cattle especially, it really helps if you can have the water is placed in your paddock so that ideally the cows don't have to walk any more than 200 feet. That's sometimes really hard, but if you can stretch them out even to 300 feet where they don't have to walk more than 300 feet to get that water, when they don't have to walk any more than 300 feet, they come to the water in singles and twos. They don't all get up in mass and head to the water. But if you have a water that's more than 300 feet, like 500 or 600 feet away from any part of your paddock, what cattle's nature is they'll wait for one or two to start going to the water, and then they'll all come in, the whole herd of them. And they don't just come in and drink and go straight out. They come in, drink, and they stand around, maybe lie around, right around the water. And so for about 100 feet around your water, that ground is pretty well decimated. It's trampled down, a lot of the grass doesn't grow, and weeds come up, and you're losing a lot of your production from that ground. So ideally, if you can design your paddock size and your water replacement so that they don't have to walk more than 300 feet, that's just perfect, and you don't have that problem. Sheep, it's not quite so important. They tend to come up in singles anyway. And the other thing about sheep is that their water requirement is quite a bit lower on irrigated grass, and so quite often, even in a hot summer day like 90 degrees, you can stand here all day long and they'll come up in twos and threes and then go right back out again. So it's not as much of a problem with sheep as is with cattle. So anyway, all you do is, once you got your bibs placement, your faucets placed in your water line, it's really simple. All you do is hook this thing up with a plain garden hose fitting. And crack the spigot. And the advantage of a system like this is it's very portable, easy to do. If you make a mistake, just plug the mistake. You know, or if you want to have a water replacement somewhere else, just get a hacksaw out and a T insert and another bib valve, and you're ready to go. One thing in cold climates, this above ground system does not work very well when it's below zero. So we have to go to a different type of system when we're stockpiling grass. Mainly what we do is that rely on snow. Sheep eat snow very well, and it satisfies their maintenance requirement for water. Generally in the winter they're not lactating. They've got a couple, 3 lambs in them, but that requirement is also very low, and so they do very fine just eating snow. If you don't have snow cover, which sometimes we don't when we're eating stockpiled forage, we just make a way for them to get back to the corrals and water there out of the heated waterers there. So the system works pretty well. I would never ever really bury my supply line because I can't figure out well enough in advance where I want all my waterers.